Welcome, everybody, to our first MUUSJA convening call of this new 2016-17 church year. Thank you for all of you who have joined us so far, and welcome to those of you who are watching this video after the fact. We do these convening calls. We started this last year, and every month MUUSJA offers an opportunity for Unitarian Universalists around the state to connect via this magnificent Zoom technology to talk about a social justice issue of interest or a leadership issue for folks who are doing social justice work in their congregations. And one of the things about serving a state as geographically large as Minnesota is that often our folks don't have a chance to meet face-to-face. And so using this technology gives us an opportunity to build relationship and build our skills. So we're excited to relaunch this year, and we'll have lots of exciting topics coming up as the year goes on. We will be announcing convening call dates in our newsletters as we go forward. This evening, we're going to be focusing on voting and voting rights. And for those of you who might have a debate hangover after last night, hopefully this will be a refreshing and energizing way to talk about how we respond to this political moment that we're in right now, in which both national and local races have a lot to do with determining the political landscape and the social landscape in which we and our kindred will be living in the coming months and years. So this is important stuff. MUUSJA has a long history of working for voting rights and making sure that we are engaging deeply in the democratic process. And we're going to hear a little bit about that tonight from our various presenters. I'm going to briefly go over the agenda here. We're going to start with just a little chalice lighting. I'm going to ask folks to go around and introduce yourselves in a second and tell us where you're calling in from and which congregation you are a part of. And then the meat of our presentation is we are going to hear from Jeff Narabrook tonight, who is the Voter Outreach Director for the Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State. We are so glad to have Jeff with us this evening. And Jeff's going to give us a lot of stuff to chew on. And then we're going to have a little minute for question and answers, and then we're going to hear a presentation from the MUUSJA Voting Rights Group about the work that they have done in the past and where they're going as we head into the future with that work. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to start. I opened my hymnal to this, my gray hymnal that lives in my house because I'm a huge nerd like that. I opened it to this quote from Dorothy Day, and I offer that as our chalice lighting. I've already lit our chalice off camera, but I invite us all to just take a deep breath together and hear these words from Dorothy Day. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do. And with that, let's get to it. A couple of very quick notes about Zoom if you're not familiar with the technology. Up in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, you should have the option to have speaker view or gallery view. If you click on that little button, it will shift between. Gallery view gives you what I like to call the Brady Bunch version, where you can see lots of faces on the screen at the same time. Speaker view will have the person who's speaking big on your screen and everybody else in a little line at the top. You can mute yourself down at the bottom left-hand corner by clicking on that little microphone button. If you have connection problems at any point, you can click on the stop video, and that uses less bandwidth and so might make your connection better. You can also always call in on the phone if you're having any problems. There is a chat option on that bottom bar there too. If you click on chat, a little sidebar will come up and you can send a message to everybody in the group. Or if you click on the names of, if you click on that little everyone button, you will also get the names of any individual person, so you can send them an individual message. If you have questions or any concerns during the conference tonight, you can send chats directly to me, and I will try and answer them as soon as they come through. I will also be taking questions while Jeff is speaking that you would ask for him to address. And so if you want to address those questions to me or to the whole group, that's fine, and we'll get to them as they come up. I think that's all of our Zoom technology pieces. For those of you who weren't here, we are recording this call and we'll be posting it on our website, so you can share with all of your friends the fantastic things that you have learned here today. So let us start by just having folks very briefly tell us your name and what congregation you are affiliated with, if any, and we will just say hi to everybody. Let's start with Jenny, because you're right next to me in my Brady Bunch view here.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. So I'm Jenny Thomas, and I was, I guess, a co-founder of our Voting Rights Working Group, and I am a member of First Universalist Church. Is that enough for now?
Perfect. Thank you. Jack, you are next.
Hello, I am Jack Gady, and I am currently MUUSJA's intern for Justice and Religious Leadership. Working on my final year at United Seminary, and I go to First Universalist Church as well.
Fabulous. Sherry.
I am a board member of MUUSJA. I've been a board member for a couple of years. Prior to that time, I worked at, I have a different job now, but I used to work at League of Women Voters Minnesota, where I work very closely with Jeff to help defeat the constitutional amendment that would have required a photo ID. So we have a great history of collaborating, and I really am looking forward to hearing his presentation.
Fabulous. Thank you. Jeff, and then Kathy, you'll be up next. You're muted, Jeff.
And none of you can read lips, apparently. I'm Jeff Snyder. I'm also on the MUUSJA board. I was, I think, initially enlisted by Jenny, if I remember correctly, strong-armed onto the board as treasurer. And I go to First Universalist.
Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Pernew, and I am with the Voting Rights Working Group, and I attend First Universalist. I got involved in this as co-chair with Jenny at the time when photo ID was proposed in the Minnesota legislature.
Fabulous. Thank you. Is there anybody I'm missing? Okay. Great. Jeff, do you want to briefly introduce yourself, and we'll have you introduce yourself more deeply later?
Yeah, so Jeff Narabrook, and actually been involved at Unity in St. Paul, and you'll hear more from me in a moment.
Fantastic. Good. Well, as I said, we are going to dive right in here with Jeff's presentation. We were so grateful that Jeff said yes to this, in large part because he said yes on National Voter Registration Day, which you may all know is happening today. Can I ask those of you, by the way, who are not speaking, to mute yourselves if you need, because we're getting a little feedback. And so Jeff is going to talk this evening about a number of different aspects of voting issues that he sees in his position at the Secretary of State's office. And first, I want to actually just ask by Jeff giving us a little snapshot into your life, and tell us about your day today. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to sort of talk us through the number of things that you want to present to us.
Sure. Well, it was a very busy day, National Voter Registration Day, and it's kind of almost more of a National Voter Registration Week. A lot of partners are doing things the past couple days, so to be honest, I spent a lot of time today working to finalize some educational materials that we're sending out to partners to get our mock election that we're doing for high school students in order. We're doing a lot of engagement with colleges and universities, so hiring some temporary staff to staff our call center for the public. So I actually didn't have a whole lot to do with on the ground registration work today, but Secretary Simon was out at the University of Minnesota. He was out at a high school today, and really a lot of my work is done, and it's just implementing it at this point, given how close we are to everything. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on making it to the point of the harvest and not just the seed planting.
Yes.
Jeff, I believe that you have some slides that you want to share with us.
I do.
You can just go ahead and share your screen and kick us right off.
Okay, so let me jump in here. And put this in present.
And folks, for those of you who now have a little window of faces on your side, you can minimize that by clicking on the little minimize window up in the top left-hand corner of those faces so that you can see the slides clearly.
Okay, so do you see my slides on full screen now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right, so I do voter outreach at the office. What that means is really getting communities and voters involved who are the least likely to participate, and we're going to talk about some of who those voters might be. I kind of wanted to go through these items. An overview of this election. There's a lot more at stake than the president, and that's something we really want the public to be talking about and thinking about. Talk a little bit about who votes, who doesn't, and why. What has worked to increase voter turnout, and then go through our voter registration laws, get everybody prepared to do any kind of engagement you're going to be doing. Oops, I lost that view. Is my signal breaking up at all, Ashley, or is it okay?
Nope, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, it was telling me my signal was getting weak.
Okay.
And then kind of finish with some resources. So I know, I've worked with several of you before, and I know many of you are probably very involved in this. So please send me your questions so we can focus on the things that any gaps that you have. So let's start with what's on the ballot this year. I think we all know what's at the top of the ticket. And what a lot of people don't know is what's down ticket. And I think we have a culture and certainly media that supports the president is all we all think and talk about, this presidential race. And I certainly am hooked into that in my own way. But it's important to remind people, because they really don't know, at least many folks, the importance of state government in their lives. And it's not the easiest conversation to have. It's not a soundbite conversation, but kind of regardless of who's elected president, our state government is making a lot of decisions about your life, about all of our lives, and really, frankly, is a more relevant actor in all of our lives than the president in many respects. Obviously, the president's very important, but the president, first of all, we don't pass a lot of laws in Congress these days, and hopefully that'll change, but we know the state stuff is really important. Many people are not aware and still aren't aware that there's a constitutional amendment on the ballot this year for Minnesota, and that is dealing with how legislator pay and salary is set. So that's another thing people can vote on. And then we have a state Supreme Court justice race that will be on everybody's ballots. And then kind of depending on where you live, it'll be a number and mix of Court of Appeals judges and state district court judges. And then it looks like this slide is going off screen at the bottom. I imported this from PowerPoint, but it's so at the bottom there is county commissioners, other local offices, school board, mayor in some places, and that'll just depend on where you live. So the gist of all this is, even if people don't like any of the presidential candidates, leave that office blank if that's where you're at. There's other reasons to show up and vote. Our office kind of has this goal set to make Minnesota #1 again in voter turnout. We have had a great streak of leading the country. You can see the little chart there. With some anomalies, we've been #1 for years and years, or very close to it. And in 2014, we went down to #6, which a lot of states would be thrilled to be #6. But this is kind of the challenge that we've set for ourselves and for the public and groups like yours to really be engaging everybody to turn out. So we're really looking at upper 70% in terms of voter turnout for Minnesota in a presidential. All right, so the direction I want to go for a little bit is talking about who votes and who doesn't and why. Who is less likely to vote? You probably all have kind of different socio-demographic characteristics you might throw out there, but there's really clear data in trends in terms of who votes and who doesn't, in terms of percentages. So young people are less likely to vote. People with low incomes, people with less education, voters who have a disability face barriers and are less likely to vote in many cases, as are new Americans, and people of color, although we're going to see that it's more complex than grouping all people of color together. So, for instance, take a look at voter turnout by income. So what you're seeing on the screen, this is a chart from just 2014, so our last midterm election. But it's extremely clear, right? The more money you make, the more likely you are to turn out, with, you know, mid 50% turnout for those making over $100,000 and down in the 20s for those making from no income to $15,000. You'll see a similar trend with age, okay? And this chart that you see has 2 years on it. The blue line is the 2014 midterm. The gray line is our last presidential we had in 2012. So kind of everybody votes more at the presidential rates, but regardless, you still see young people voting less, all the way up. And, you know, as you become much older, there is a drop off at the very upper age ranks. But it's very clear that the younger you are, the less you vote. The older you are, the more you vote. Here's a racial breakdown. This is actually an average of voting between 2004 and 2014 for all federal elections. So this isn't looking at one, this is an average for both midterms and president between that time. But you see some interesting things here. White voter turnout still is the highest in that period. Although it's important to note that black voter turnout exceeded white voter turnout in 2012. And that was the first time that's happened. And in 2008, black women led for any kind of racial and gender group. So we have seen black voter turnout rising. Asian and Latino voter turnout continues to lag behind fairly significantly. And it's important to note, especially with Latino voters, where, you know, there is some percent who aren't eligible to vote. The numbers that you see here reflect eligibility. So it's not just that there's fewer Latinos who are eligible. Even among eligible Latinos, there's a very low turnout rate. And then education. So those who've had a BA, 65%, and this is again in that same time period, versus only 27% for folks who have less than a high school diploma. Now, we don't have figures specifically for Minnesota on any of these indicators. These are all national figures. But it's very clear that you can kind of predict, at least where things stand now, who's likely to vote, who's not. And so from this, you can deduce, if you're going to be spending time doing outreach, especially in a presidential, really focusing on these groups is important. When we come to the midterm, kind of no group is safe. We have pathetic turnout kind of among all groups in a midterm, although, you know, these proportions still are true relatively speaking. But to give you some perspective, in a midterm turnout, 55% turnout is kind of like top in the nation for all of your eligible voters. So I like to say, and I'm sure, you know, Jenny and Kathy and Sherry have heard me say this, but when as far as Minnesota being number one, it's kind of like saying we're the prettiest kid in an ugly family. It's great that we're number one in turnout. And in a presidential, we don't do bad, you know, up close to 80%, 8 out of 10, that's good. In a midterm, not so pretty, barely half, if that, and that's still nation leading or close to it. So just put that, put a post-it in your mind for to come back in 2 years. And really, if there's a time when more work needs to be done, it's in those midterms. But back to this year's elections, why aren't people voting? So what's going on with this? These are things that you hear from people as reasons why they don't vote. So some iteration of, I don't like politics, politicians, you know, don't care about me, Maybe for some of these local elections, they're not important, right? People intuitively get the president's a really important office. So they may not get that with the other ones. You hear one vote doesn't matter a lot. And then there's kind of the group of logistical issues. So I'm too busy, or I'm out of town. I'm sick, or I can't get to the polling place. I didn't register. And you know, in some states, if you don't register well in advance, then you can't vote. I don't know who the candidates are, right? I have a disability that makes it hard for me to vote. Now, I'll say for a number of these, there are kind of perceived barriers, and then there's actual ones too. So for instance, a lot of people say, well, I got to work, or maybe they work a 12-hour shift that day. Well, under Minnesota law, you're actually entitled to get paid time off in order to vote. A lot of people don't know that. Employers don't know that sometimes. So there are some things there that help with this. You know, maybe it's voting early with an absentee ballot in the mail. You know, maybe it's getting that time off from work. And one of our jobs, especially as voting rights people, is not just getting improved laws, but making sure people know about the current system that we have, which is quite good, and that people are able to take advantage of that. Any questions so far coming through, Ashley? Should I keep plowing through?
I think you should go ahead and keep going through. I do have one clarification question about something you said. The demographics about breakdown by race. You mentioned in Latinos, is that 26% number that we saw, did you say it was or was not the general population? Is that eligible voters or everybody?
Right. To be clear, that is just eligible.
Okay.
Yep. So it's right. It's not skewed by there being ineligible voters in that pool, right? And all those figures you're seeing were of eligible voters. They're estimates from the Census Bureau, but there's as close as we have to real numbers in terms of turnout.
Great. Thank
you.
Yeah.
You know, I wish we had better figures for Minnesota, by the way, and we often get asked, of course, our office, you know, when you register to vote, we don't ask what your racial background is. And so we don't have that information. And the only way to gather it is through surveys, and the Census Bureau is the main source that we get from that. All right. So let's talk about what has worked to increase voter turnout, knowing that this is a large, complex issue, and kind of the crux of it in terms of both the problem and the challenge and the opportunity for a solution is that voting is it's a social behavior. So you see there, one of the best predictors of if you vote is whether your friends and family vote. We like to think about voting, and it certainly is on some level a personal choice, an individual choice. We sometimes talk about it as an individual responsibility, certain an individual right, as a civic duty. And not to say that those things aren't true, but voting is really not so different than any other activity that we partake in, whether it's exercising, belonging to a faith community, choosing your career, you know, the people you hang out with. It's social. So it's not as much that people have gone through some sort of rational thinking to get to why they're doing what they're doing. It's more that you're in an environment where voting is what you do, or voting is not what you do, right? If the people that you know and trust vote, you're likely to. And, you know, just speaking for myself, right? My parents didn't really even have to teach me to vote. It was what they did. Kind of, I learned that, and it's kind of naturally what I wanted to do. So that's important to understand. And that also that it becomes a behavior like any other, where if you voted in the past, you're quite likely to vote again in the future. So kind of getting people into that system is really important. So if we look at it from that perspective, and this is where it's both a challenge and an opportunity, it's really about what makes that person tick and what matters to them. Personalized methods and messages work better. So I can come from the Secretary of State's office, and not that this can't be also effective, but I can come and tell you, well, look, you know, here are the candidates, here's why they should matter to you, here's some reasons to vote. That'll work sometimes. but what's more important is relationships. And you see on the screen, you know, it's less the message and more the messenger. The timing of it, whether it's a trusted messenger, and so forth. So kind of the challenge with this is it's not easy to get new voters, and by new voters I mean like brand new voters who haven't been voting, you know, even just door knocking, stranger to stranger interactions. It's not easy that way. What works best is a trusted connection. Now that's where both nonprofits and faith communities have a really strong, what would it be? A strong resume, you could say, to make that happen, right? And it's actually been proven. So nonprofits, whether it's a social service provider, a faith community, have had great success increasing voter turnout among the people that they serve. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense given some of the real relational things. So there's you're already in a relationship of trust, hopefully, with those in that community or in that organization. Maybe you're seeking some support services from them. There's credibility. There's nonpartisanship, which is both a requirement, and I'll say more about that for you know, churches and faith groups. But it's also an asset. You know, you're not out there to tell them who to vote for. You're out there to kind of help them help themselves, so to speak, right? And empower them. So they're setting the direction of their community and what they want to see. I've been involved with some studies that some which have taken place here in Minnesota, where what we've done is we've engaged, you know, local nonprofits, had them track their contacts with voters. So they asked them to register to vote, or they asked them to pledge to vote or promise to vote. And then because voting is a matter of public record, we then compared whether those people actually did show up and vote. And then we compared the rate that they turned out to the rate that their peers did. So, you know, if we're engaging, in this example, a low-income person, and the rate that they turned out if we engage them versus their peers who didn't. And the numbers are really impressive. So basically, the nonprofits that engage these voters, kind of the turnout rate outperformed the peers who weren't engaged by nonprofit by a significant margin. Varied a little bit by group, but, you know, upwards of 10 to 15 percentage points increases in turnout. Kind of another thing I like to share about this is, and I'm sure many of you have been involved with campaigns, and this isn't necessarily to besmirch them, as to say that this is just what they are. Campaigns are not out there to get new voters, okay? Certainly they'd love that, but that's not their job. What is their job? Their job is to find not only who are the, you know, likely voters, but who are the likely voters who are likely to support their candidate. They don't bother with the infrequently voters. They don't bother, of course, with people who aren't registered. They don't have time for that, the resources, and they don't need them, right? In a crass sense, they just need to get more votes than the other person. I say that just to kind of put it in context that I see nonprofits, you know, broadly speaking, including faith groups, to be the only place where this work will and can happen. There's no other segment of society that reaches just the audience that needs to be reached, that has the assets and really the standing and respect to do this kind of thing. There's about 800,000 people in Minnesota who are not registered to vote, who are eligible. That number stays fairly static. That's about 20% of all eligible voters. So getting to those people are hard, and I won't pretend that those are easy conversations to have. Some people will just never want to engage. But there are people out there who I don't think understand that voting is about their self-interest. And that's the message that I think people need to connect with, however they do. So to be clear, nonprofits, 501c3s can absolutely do these activities. Sometimes you'll get skittishness or concerns that this is, you know, politics. It's not considered politics by the IRS. You can register people to vote. You can do voter education, whether that's hosting a candidate forum, getting people connected with a sample ballot, like the League of Women Voters used to do a candidate guide, things like that. And then also candidate engagement. Excuse me one sec. So candidate engagement would be, like, let's say, First Universalist had an issue that they're working on in the community, and the congregation could put together a packet about that issue, send it out to all the candidates, say, this is something going on in our community. We hope to work with whoever wins this election to advance these issues. And there's different ways you can do that, but engaging candidates on the front end before they're even elected, they need that information too, right? I think people, for as much as elected officials deserve our ire and frustration, it's a really hard job. They need to be experts in things that they can't possibly be for one person. And, of course, they specialize in their committees. But I think that a lot of nonprofit communities shortchange themselves that they're kind of they're the experts about what's going on the ground. And if the candidates don't know that, and you can help shape the candidates that way, there's no way that they're going to be able to be responsive in the way that they need to be. So that's another thing to think about either in this cycle or in the future. And I know many of you probably are doing this in MUUSJA already. What is the IRS rule? And again, IRS doesn't treat, for this purpose, churches or any nonprofit any different. They're all just considered a 501c3. The rule is you can't support or oppose, explicitly or implicitly, a candidate or party for public office. I think an explicit endorsement is pretty clear. You can't say vote for this person, vote against that person. An implicit endorsement is a little trickier. Here would be an implicit endorsement. I think that candidate X just has the platform that's really going to get done what we need to get done in our community. And this person has, worked so hard on this issue that we care a lot about, and has done a great job, and I think would really, come through for us. That's an implicit endorsement, right? Pretty clear who you're endorsing.
So it's everything short of saying, vote for this person.
Right. And it can come up for organizations in interesting ways, like I said, I happen to attend Unity. I know Representative Dabney's a member there, right? So what would an implicit endorsement be where maybe Unity has, Representative Dabney on the front page of their website? It could be completely, not meant to be an endorsement, but those are the kinds of things where you have to just think about how it's being perceived when somebody's a candidate. And sometimes candidates may, I don't think trying to harm a nonprofit, but they may not be aware of these rules, and maybe they'll splash a cover of a picture of them at your nonprofit all over their campaign literature. They're doing something good. Those are things that you want to politely ask the candidate to maybe not do. But as far as you acting as individuals, it's just not telling people who to vote for and keeping it all above board. No wink, wink, nod, nods. Just keeping it straight, which, I can say could be a real challenge in an explicitly progressive faith community. So that's something to grapple with as far as what it would be like to have this conversation and still express your values and so forth. And I don't have the answer to what that looks like, but that's the IRS rule.
Jeff, can I ask another clarifying question on there?
Yeah.
I hear from churches all the time, for example, that, we are working on reproductive rights, or we're working on, XYZ issue. And they want to talk about that in an election cycle in which that is a contended issue among candidates. And most often I hear people say, here are the reasons why this issue is a faith issue for us. Here are our faith-based perspectives on this issue. And then they will say something along the lines of, now you can find out information about candidates' positions on these issues by going to XYZ site. But they cannot say, this person supports it and this person does not, because that little piece would be the crossing of the line. Is that right?
I think that's right. And I mean, it can sound a little bit like a game, a little bit silly in terms of going up to that line. But no, I think that's right. And the IRS doesn't, this is basically the IRS rule. And what that means is always has to be interpreted. So if there's a complaint, which are very rare, they would look at the facts and circumstances, and they would make a ruling. I can say that the IRS doesn't come after many groups. It probably goes after the most egregious ones. And even so, the IRS has been in hot water for, allegedly going after groups from a political perspective. So I don't imagine the IRS is doing a whole lot of this issue these days, to be perfectly honest. But that's right. It's all about the facts and circumstances, and you can certainly have issues, positions, and bring those through. The one time where you'd want to take pause is the more kind of high profile and clear it is. Like, let's say there's a local issue where the lines are clearly drawn and there's two clear candidates, two clear perspectives, and that may not be the time to talk about your issues in that context, okay? But if you're talking about something like reproductive rights, broader general issue for the public, not synonymous with any given campaign out there, right now that at least that I'm aware of, right? That's a much safer thing. And you'll find all different types of thresholds for comfort with this among nonprofits. Some will push farther, some choose to be very conservative in their orientation on this, and in the end, it's a legal issue that legal advisors are best to guide you with if it ever gets to that point. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. This is just one of the questions that I hear most often from our congregation, so I wanted to spend a minute on that.
Yeah.
Thank you for it.
Yeah, as long as they're making a good faith effort, okay, I think they're fine. That's the main thing, is that they're honestly not trying to endorse or oppose a particular candidate. By the way, the Alliance for Justice is a great resource for this, and they would have a fact sheet they do have a fact sheet for faith communities that you might want to get, Ashley, and distribute. And it'll cover this kind of in a bulleted format.
Yeah, I will. Thank you for that. I will link to that and put it with the recording to this call. Thank you.
That'd be great. Okay. All right. So we've talked about who votes, who doesn't, and why. We've talked a little bit about what might work, or what settings or context might work to motivate people to vote, which is connection, relationships, finding what matters to them. And then we talked a little bit about what you can do as a faith community, which is quite a bit. It's educating people, it's registering people, it's driving people to the polls, it's kind of everything short of telling them who to vote for you can do. So I want to do a quick run through of voter registration laws so that everybody knows some of the basics. The requirements to vote, right? And this is for Minnesota: a U.S. citizen, at least 18 years old on election day, who's been in the state for at least 20 days. If you're 17 today, but you'll be 18 by November 8, you can register. If you're a resident of Minnesota, what that really means is that you've lived here for 20 days and kind of intending to stay here, you're not just visiting. Doesn't matter what your driver's license says, or where you may also own a property, or if you pay taxes somewhere else in addition. It's really just that you've been present in the state here and that this is your primary residence. Then this bullet, and I know this group, probably all of you know this quite well, that in Minnesota the law is if you've had a felony conviction, you can vote after you've finished your sentence. You all, and our office as well, are trying to change this so that immediately after you're released from incarceration, your right is restored. That's not the rule right now in Minnesota. The rule right now is you have to finish your probation or your parole, also called supervised release. You probably also know that this is the biggest point of confusion in the public. If you ask your colleagues tomorrow, hey, do you think that the people who have a felony can vote? Most of the time they'll say no. That's what most people think, at least when you pose the question to them that way. So what we end up seeing are two things that we don't want. Most commonly, we'll see people who've had a criminal conviction continue to believe that they can't vote even after they're eligible. So we see that all the time. And then we also see sometimes, although it's much less common, people who are still under supervised release thinking that they are eligible. Because you know what, in other states, there's different laws. So it's very confusing for the public. So the key point here is, and this is a population I really think needs a lot more support, and particularly those who are no longer in the system, because we have no way to reach those folks, right? They're not in any system that we can reach out and contact them through. They're off paper. But it's getting that message out there that if you've served your sentence, your probation and parole, you can vote. It's really important. And then finally, voters under guardianship can vote unless a judge specifically revoked their right. Typically, those who are placed under guardianship have either a cognitive disability or a traumatic brain injury, situations like that. And those voters can vote unless the judge revoked their right, which is pretty rare. It doesn't happen very much. So most people under guardianship can vote. So that's who can vote. Registration, we have a wonderful option here in Minnesota, which is to register on Election Day. We've been doing it since the 70s. I think we were either the first or second state, I can't remember, it was us in Maine, to implement that. And if you lived in Minnesota your whole life, or most of it, or been voting here, it's useful to remember that in those other states, there's only about 12 of them that do it like we do. In those other states, if you're not registered, upwards of 30 days before the election, somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, you can't vote on Election Day, and there's no way to change that. That's why today's National Voter Registration Day. It's set before any of the state deadlines hit. So everybody's still eligible across the country to register today. But in a couple weeks, those deadlines will start hitting in places like New York and in Florida and other massive states, and in small states too. Those people who aren't registered then won't be able to vote. Now, it presents a unique challenge for Minnesota. It's a challenge I find having, but it still is a challenge, which is every other place we can kind of scare people into voting and into registering, not into voting, scare people into registering. Look, this is your last day to register, can kind of get everybody's attention that way. In Minnesota, you can kind of just roll out of bed and register on Election Day. So a lot of people don't register in advance. Is that a problem? It really depends. It depends on if you have the documents you'll need to register on Election Day. If you register in advance, you don't need to bring anything, right? That's what the whole photo ID debate was about, was if registered voters need to show an ID. Because those who aren't registered, you do need to show an ID or have somebody vouch for you, right? And there's other methods. So encourage people, and we got a couple weeks left for this, encourage everybody to register by Tuesday, October 18th. It'll save them time on Election Day. It cuts down on lines. It happens to be good for keeping the cost of elections lower, which is also a good thing. But at the same time, let people know, and especially after October 18th, start talking about it. Look, if you can register on Election Day, but you'll need to prepare to bring that document. You need to find out specifically what to bring. Anybody who's changed address or names needs to register again. Or if you haven't voted for 4 years in a row, register again. If the person you're talking to isn't sure, just register them again, and that's fine. And really like this question in terms of an engagement question, are you registered to vote at your current address? If you spent time doing this, if you ask somebody, are you registered to vote, or do you want to register? It's kind of a really easy question to blow off. Like a lot of people just say, yeah, I'm registered, or move on. If you just say, and this isn't magic, but if you say, are you registered to vote at your current address, you're assuming that they're interested in, that they're a voter, and you're help queuing for them that, I guess maybe I have moved since I last voted. And so they get them thinking about that, because they're going to need to register again anyway. All right. A couple little sales pitches you can give to help people through this. People are in a hurry. It really doesn't take long. So you say, just take a minute. And if you're doing a paper form, say, I'll save you the postage. I'll hand it in for you, if you're doing a drive. People who say no, I would encourage just a little soft pushback. You can decide later if you want to vote or not. Today we'll just get you registered. Here's the form. And I bet those of you who've done a lot of this work have heard this one, I don't want jury duty. So people sometimes say that. I don't know. I think jury duty would be interesting, but you know, you can tell them, don't worry, juries aren't selected only by voter rolls anymore. It's true. It's also, if anybody who has a driver's license is really in the pool, so you're not going to like increase your chance by registering to vote. And then the biggest one is this last one, right? Some version of voting doesn't matter. I don't care, they don't care, voting doesn't matter. I really encourage people to empathize and just meet people where they're at. I don't know about you, it's not a very big stretch for me to tap into my own cynicism about things, and just let them know, like, yeah, I understand that, I feel that way, or a lot of people feel that way. But a couple things I like to share is telling them, look, they're going to make decisions about your life, whether you show up and vote or not. And, you know, not only that, but that person there and that person there, they're going to show up and vote whether you do or not. So you can either give them your power and have really more power over your life in a very literal way, if indirectly, or you can help make the decision yourself. You don't have to like the candidates to vote. You don't have to like politics to vote. And kind of another way we say that is you can ignore politics, but it won't ignore you. So just giving people a sense that, you know, like it or not, this will affect you, whether you accept that or not. And if you can get that across to them, that this is about fighting for yourself and not supporting a candidate that you don't like or don't care about. That's not what this is about. If you can help them build that sense of self-empowerment, I think you might make some ground there. So I know I've covered a lot in a short amount of time. I'm going to wrap up here with some resources and then go into questions. And in the resources, I'll walk you through our website just a little bit. And I'll actually take you there now. And let me see. Okay, are you guys seeing my, yeah, you're still seeing that screen. Okay. So on our website, if you go to mnvotes.org, I'll make this big, you'll get to our elections landing page. I want to point out just a few things. For you all, you'll see down here this Get Involved section. And this is where you can get our outreach materials. So here you can order free copies or download and print voter registration applications. For example, we have these in 10, now 11 different languages. We've added Karen recently. We have fact sheets, how to vote, new voters, election day registration. You see we have it on a whole number of topics, voting with a criminal record. And a lot of these, if you go order free copies, we don't have this for all of them, but you can actually order these fact sheets and have them shipped to you. So do this soon. Obviously, we're running short on time, but this ships in about 48 hours typically, so they will get there quickly. We have this overview card, which is kind of a brochure. We have posters. We have window clings that you can have up on. You can put it on your car. You can put it in your church building. I will vote stickers, videos to share, stuff for your website. So, and then emails and social media samples. So we've tried to just make things kind of turnkey with templates that you can just take and implement. So, for instance, you know, we actually had a sample email for National Voter Registration Day. You could take that and modify it, and we have one for different timing as well. So those are some tools to use out in the field. And then on our website, you can register online, of course. You can apply to get your absentee ballot online. And you guys can decide for yourself. I'm not crazy, frankly, about how we have this divided. I'm not sure it's totally clear, but you know, we have register to vote, election day voting, and then there's other ways to vote. Other ways to vote is where you'll find information about voting early. Early voting started last Friday. I got my ballot in the mail on Saturday, which is fun to get. So you can apply now, anytime to get those. And you can also vote early in person. And so on our website, you can find either a county or a city and town office where you can go in person to vote. Only a select number of cities offer this. So here in Ramsey, Well, actually quite a few in Ramsey and in the metro area. You can always vote at your county office, and in some cases you can vote in your city office if it's listed here as well. Okay, that means you can go in person. You're technically filling out an absentee ballot, so you'll fill out an application, they'll hand you your ballot, you'll fill it out, you'll put it in your envelope as if you were gonna mail it back, but you'll just give it back to them, and then you're done. Those who have friends, family, loved ones abroad, students abroad, you can vote from military while you're in the military or overseas. And so there's lots of ways to participate regardless of if you're in the area or not. Anybody can vote absentee for any reason or no reason at all. You don't have to give a reason. That's a new law since 2014. You had to say, oh, I'm sick or I'm going to be out of town. Now you can do it just if you want to. And then the last thing I'll point out here is the What's on My Ballot tool. So on this page we have, I'll take you there in a second, but we have information about that proposed amendment to the Constitution, right? So here's the language that's on the ballot. There's more information. This is actually the constitutional text itself that would go in the Constitution. Some third-party information. We have now a link, and any group can request to have this added about groups that are for or against this amendment or neutral. And then view your sample ballot. So I'll pull mine up really quick. And I hope this isn't redundant for those of you who've done this a million times, but put in your address. And this is something you can provide to people, our sample ballots. So when your ballot information comes up, you'll see that both the candidates are listed kind of in a table format on the page, and it'll go all the way through my ballot. So you can see I have a large swath of judges to vote for, none of which have any opponent. All of these judges are running unopposed on my ballot. And then kind of if there's a link that the candidate has provided when they filed for office, it goes up here, so you can click on that to learn more. You'll note that there's 9 options for president. So there's many more than probably most people will realize until they get into the booth. And then you can click for the actual ballot itself. So this is exactly what my ballot will look like. I can print this out, mark it up the way I want to vote, bring it in with me, and then just transfer my votes. So it's a nice way that I don't have to memorize, especially if, I'm trying to figure out the judges or things like that may be harder to recall. So that is kind of just the main basic things I want to show on the site. Let me go back to the slides to see. I think we've covered, we kind of have just covered this. You can get your polling place data, sample ballot. You can check to see if you're registered to vote on our website, apply to vote by mail, and learn more. So any voters you're working with who are in special circumstances, homeless, had a felony conviction, college students, we have pages for each of those circumstances where you can get more data. So I am gonna pipe down for a minute and see where we're at, Ashley, with questions, thoughts, could be about finding things on our website, the process, anything that I've covered. Anything come through on the chat lines, Ashley?
That's great, Jeff. Thank you so much. There was so much in that, and I learned a lot.
I hope I didn't go too fast.
No. It's great.
Okay.
Would you mind stop sharing your screen? That button should be up at the top for you.
There we go.
And folks, I'm going to open it up for questions from people in the audience. I know I've got a million, so I could fill up the whole time, but I'll let other folks ask too. You can either click on the chat button in the bottom of your screen and then write a message, which you can ask that way, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question directly.
I find one of my greatest feelings of inadequacy when I go to vote is when I get to judges. And I find myself thinking, I'm a pretty smart guy, and if I feel inadequate, I have to assume that everybody else who votes for judges feels inadequate too. So what's the point?
You know what? I'm going to see if Sherry has anything to say on this, who works at the bar. I tell you, Jeff, I'm in the same boat you are, and here I am at the Secretary of State's office, and I was just talking with a colleague the other day, kind of saying, why do we elect these, or and I know that there's good reasons for doing it, but as far as knowing what you're doing when you're voting for X or Y person, Sherry, do you have any magic answers from the bar world?
I work for the Minnesota State Bar Association, and I do think it is somewhat difficult for voters to get accurate information about how to evaluate, what to know about a judge. There are general guidelines that we recommend consideration of. They're used by the commission that recommends judges for appointment when someone is filled in during when usually, actually, we usually are not choosing a new judge when we vote. It's someone who's already been appointed and had held office for a while. And to do that, most of them were evaluated by an independent commission made up of citizens and attorneys, and went through some evaluation to make sure that they held the qualities suitable for a judge. And so I'm not saying that makes every incumbent a good judge, but it does mean that most people who are on the bench already have met some reasonable criteria. This year, the Minnesota State Bar Association does have on its website information on the 2 Supreme Court candidates, and we have questionnaires that were answered by each of them, and the results of a poll of our members that was done to evaluate who they thought should be the candidate chosen for the Supreme Court judge. And I mean, honestly, around the country, your question about why do we vote for judges, well, around the country, judges are selected in different ways. Our federal system, all the judges are appointed. We never vote for them. Minnesota comes from a more populist base with believing that there should be some citizen input into who sits on the bench. And Minnesota has largely escaped some of the problems that many states are experiencing with selection of judges, where there's rigorous campaigning, lots of money put into the races, and certain hot button issues are chosen to influence the vote of voters. And so I think we have a pretty high quality bench, and I'm not sure of all the reasons for that, but I feel really glad that we've escaped some of the problems of the rest of the country in that regard.
Thank you, Sherry. Other questions from the gallery?
This is Jenny. I have a question for Jeff. If you get asked for an absentee ballot, can you then take it to your city hall and have it voted and counted, like if you just picked it up that same day?
Well, it needs, yes, although it needs to go back to the office that sent it. If it was sent to you by your county, it goes back to the county. Sent to the city, goes back to the city.
Okay.
I guess years ago, people used to bring their absentee ballots to their polling place as an option. We can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have to be received by like 3 o'clock or something on election day, correct?
You can drop them up until 3 p.m. on election day. They need to be either dropped off in person by then or received in the mail by the close of polls, whenever the last mail delivery is. When I do absentee voting, it's kind of good to know your audience. Like, some people are good at paperwork and deadlines, and some people aren't. And voting absentee really isn't the most straightforward thing. Kind of, you get a set of detailed technical instructions. I mean, we've tried to make them plain language, but they can be a challenge. You need a witness. You got to fill out your return envelope just right. You got to get it back, not as not postmarked, but returned by a certain deadline. So I think that voting in person is far easier if you have literacy issues, if timeliness and meeting deadlines isn't in your wheelhouse. So it's a great option for a lot of people. But for instance, for a lot of new Americans where this whole system's new and maybe the language proficiency isn't there, certainly try it and go for it if that's what you want. But I tend to steer people towards in-person voting, certainly for their first experience.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering about how we hear that, election judges are aging and it's difficult to find judges. And I wondered how jurisdictions cover the high need for judges during presidential elections, and also if you would comment on whether election judges can have time off of work to serve.
Yeah. Yep, they absolutely can. They're entitled by law to time off work in order to serve as an election judge. And it's a paid position, which a lot of people don't realize. And you're entitled to kind of earn the same amount that you would have as if you had gone to work. Your work can subtract the amount of earnings you got as an election judge, but basically you're guaranteed paid time off in order to serve. It's really hard for these jurisdictions to do it. I bet you Minneapolis is out there right now still trying to find people. And, it's a huge workforce. We don't actually have the figures because these people are all hired locally, but we estimate about 30,000 people are needed on election day to serve as poll workers. It's certainly, nationally, it's the largest kind of temporary workforce of any time and date in our year. So nationally, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are needed to work these polls, and by and large, they're all paid work. The rates vary, so it's really hard. That's another thing that kind of in the off season, encourage your community to be doing is getting people into that system, particularly bilingual folks who can be quite useful in places and if they're placed right. It's a great experience. It's a hard job, and a lot is expected of you, as it should be. But there's no easy answers for them. They scramble to fill those jobs a lot.
Ashley, I think we should make a point tomorrow to find out if Minneapolis, Ramsey, and the metro area, or whatever counties we can find out, are still accepting judges applications and training. And if so, that's something we could communicate right away.
Yep.
I'll work on that tomorrow.
I heard actually today that Minneapolis is still definitely looking for some folks. So my guess is that, yes, Jeff, you're right, that lots of places are still scrambling.
We got it easy at the state. We don't have to do any of that stuff. So,
yep. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind, if I just jump in about who votes and who doesn't. And I want to go back to this New Americans thing. That was really actually very surprising to me, given the process that folks have to go through to get citizenship, and how rigorous that process is and how long it takes. It's surprising to me that folks, there is not a higher rate in that. Number one, do you know why that is? Is it the literacy barrier?
So yeah, I think it's a combination of kind of not being hooked into society, integrated as well. Also, we see a lot, and this goes back to the whole voting is just a socially influenced behavior. If you think of an adult immigrant to this country, they're coming with their experience of voting in their own countries where voting was dangerous or pointless or something entirely different than what it is here. It's hard to break those habits. And I hear this, like, for instance, there is a sizable Indian American community here. And I'm told that many of them don't vote. It's seen as you just keep to yourself, and it's like, why trouble the waters? Because in a lot of these countries, you're troubling the waters when you do this. No, you just keep to yourself. It's you and your family, and if you guys are okay, don't trouble the waters. Why would you get involved with this politics business? Nothing good comes from it. So I think that a lot of people have those attitudes that they bring.
And my guess is too, after the rigmarole of going through our incredibly broken immigration process, that a lot of people just want to stay as far away from government as they possibly can.
That could be. But you do
I
hear, as an aside, a lot of people are getting citizenship this year. You've heard media reports about this. A lot of people seeking citizenship in order to vote.
Yeah.
I've seen, so it's not it's a mixed bag there.
It is certainly a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, though, actually, I think you're making reference to folks wanting to vote because there are so many issues at stake in the presidential race this year, including immigration. I'm thinking about the statistics you shared earlier about Black voter turnout in the 2008 and 2012 elections. And I'm thinking too about we've got Ilhan Omar as our, the first Somali candidate for an office. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the way certain candidates turn particular demographics out either for or against them. And whether we're likely to see that here in Minnesota, in particular in this race in which we've got the first Somali American here running.
Yeah, and I can't speak too much to, I can't predict what's going to happen in Minneapolis. And the candidate piece is a piece I didn't talk about in terms of why people vote and why they don't. But obviously that dynamics of the race dramatically affect who votes and who doesn't. I mean, you look at the top of the ticket now and how many people are essentially not interested in voting because they don't like their choices. So the candidates have an awful lot to do with turnout, especially in those midterms as well, when people aren't as tuned in. Yes, I mean, it's been really exciting to see the growth of Somali Minnesotan political power grow. We've seen that with Hmong Minnesotans. I'm really interested in Latino Minnesotans who really are behind on that measure. And demographically, if you look, Somali Minnesotans and Hmong Minnesotans tend to live in more densely urban areas. More than half of Latino Minnesotans are in small towns in greater Minnesota. And so it's harder for them to mobilize and elect candidates of choice. But there's lots of great things going on. And then you see places like Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center. I think it is the most diverse city. I believe it's the most diverse city. I think I'm speaking of Brooklyn Park. So racially, it's the most diverse city in the state. I think it goes to like Brooklyn Park, St. Paul, and then Minneapolis. They last time I knew, kind of have all white elected. So their senator, their local, their mayor, and at least, and I haven't been following it the past year and a half, but at one point it was too diverse where, the different communities of color didn't, for whatever reason, didn't band together and elect a candidate of choice. One voted for the Liberian candidate, the other voted for the Hmong candidate. So, what's happening in Cedar Riverside, I think, is unique with the opportunity in that district with the population there. So, yeah.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
There's I can't remember the name of it, if it's Pathways something, a new initiative in the Twin Cities to help young people of color get internships at the Capitol, or with organizations that are lobbying at the state Capitol. And last year was its first year. It was really successful in terms of the people who were involved. And I think it's been really hard to break the racial and ethnic barriers at the Capitol, and this offers a strong opportunity to help move forward on that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's a great program.
Great, thank you, Sherry. I will link to that too. Jeff, we have used up your time with us. I just want to thank you so much for all of this incredible information. And if I can impose on you for one more minute.
Yeah, of course.
I wonder if you might tell us what about this feels like work that's connected to Unitarian Universalist values for you, that is connected to your own faith, to your own sense of what is important and how we create a more just and loving world.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, my work is all nonpartisan, and it's been like that for a long time. Now, I have deeply held political views, and that's, even though the work that I do is nonpartisan, it ultimately is rooted in the issues that I care about. And for me, you know, with my faith, the same way. It's all about changing our society for the better. And I really believe the political process is not the only way, but it's you know, a way that we have to be involved with that. I think that there's too much cynicism out there. There's too much lack of education about what's at stake, how this whole thing works. And so my passion is really, I don't know that we're not going to get change unless or until candidates don't have to ignore a large segment of the population because they're not constituents in a real sense, right? If they're not voting. And I know that a lot of our electeds take a very broad view of who they represent. They want to do right by everybody. But there's also a level at which you can't improve people's lives who you're not of. And there's only so much I can do as a white man to try to, you know, understand the circumstances and challenges that people that aren't in my situation face. So I don't see how else to do that other than to get more people involved. And I think that that's central to kind of, yeah, what connects all this to me is just making things better. So.
Thank you, Jeff, so much. We really appreciate it. And best of luck as we continue forward toward Election Day. I know there's a lot of work on your plate and in the Secretary of State's office too. So
it'll all be over soon.
Yeah, I know. Our blessings to you. And then it starts over again, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I am going to sign off at this point in the meeting. Please be in touch, any of you, with me in my office, and we'll get you what you need to get out there, okay?
Fantastic.
Right.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good to see you all.
Good night.
Thanks.
Well, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny and or Kathy, who are going to talk to us just a little bit about the past, present, and future of voting rights work in MUUSJA's own history and in Unitarian Universalist circles more broadly here in the Twin Cities. And Jenny has had her, and Kathy have both had their fingers casted and not in that pot for a long time. And so I am so grateful to both of you for being here. And I think a lot of us are here on this call because you inspired us to be here. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, this is Jenny. I'll get started. And Kathy, you please add in whenever you want. But I just wanted to say that I'm not seeing myself. Should I be? Anyway.
If you're in speaker view, Jenny, put it on gallery view, because the one that pops up in the middle is the big view, and that's your phone.
That's it. I'm on gallery. Okay, let's see. Talking Jenny. Just a second. I know I can do this.
Top right-hand corner.
Yeah, there we go. There I am. Okay. So hopefully this is working. So I got started in voting rights work in 2005, and it was really because of concerns about, well, can you hear me? Start your video. Okay, I have to start my video. Join my computer.
I can hear you.
Does that work better?
I have
We're
to.
having a problem because we're getting two audio feeds from you, Jenny. So if you could mute your computer or hang up the phone, one or the other.
I muted the phone and I signed up on the computer. Does that work better? Okay, great. So I got started with this, in fact, in 2005, because I was worried about actually, and Sherry, I'll bet is well aware of this, the paperless voting machines and voter suppression that was really widespread in the 2000 and 2004 voting elections, especially 2004. Well, voter suppression in both, and the touchscreen voting machines that really became common by 2004. And I was so concerned about that I really started working on it. But it was really a national issue, not really a Minnesota issue. And so it made it hard to figure out how to engage. And but we formed a party group. And in 2006, we became an active MUUSJA voting or working group. But we really focused our efforts on working both locally on voter engagement and education efforts, but also nationally, because we were trying to affect this national issue. And so we participated in 4 different general assemblies, UU general assemblies, offering programs. We did educational events. We passed 1 resolution regarding racism in voting to try and promote education about that. And then we passed 2 actions of immediate witness to promote federal legislation that would help with these issues. And we sort of did our best. But then in 2010, actually, General Assembly was in Minnesota. And one of the things we featured was the fact that we have Election Day voter registration, how that has really protected us from a lot of the bad things happening in other states, because they can't cull our voter registration rolls and then eliminate your opportunity to vote. You can still register on Election Day and vote. So I was really promoting that nationally as a solution to some of the problems that we're seeing. But then what that started the conversation in Minnesota around photo ID legislation, and that happened in the legislature. And then by 2012, we had the constitutional amendment that we passed. So we really shifted our focus completely to Minnesota at that point to try and defeat the photo ID legislation. And MUUSJA really played an instrumental role in that, because we were not only very active, but we published a report that was used widespread in the state and in the legislature that documented there is no fraud or that photo ID would prevent. And so it was really an important part, and made us pretty important in the coalition that was fighting photo ID. And after that, we were pretty wary, but we did join the voting rights, stayed with the Voting Rights Coalition, and worked on the Restore the Vote Coalition to try and, we thought that was the most pressing voter suppression fact in Minnesota, that people who have had a felony conviction, well, it's the thing that Jeff talked about, where I think for every person who's not eligible to vote, who inadvertently votes before they're really completely off paper, there's probably 20 people that didn't vote at all because they were afraid. And so cleaning this up and making it very simple that if you're not in prison, you can vote, is really the best way to empower everyone to vote. And it's less costly, and it's just got all kinds of great benefits. And so we've been working on that. But we really need to change the legislature to be successful in that, because it's unfortunately had some hard time getting widespread bipartisan support on that issue.
Could you just say 1 or 2 more sentences about why that is? I know that we've talked about this being a bipartisan issue, but what needs to shift in the legislature in order for this to move? And
it's passed in the Senate 2 different years, but it hasn't gotten out of committee in the House. And I think it's actually surprising, because in fact, I think there's a perception nationally that it would empower Democrats to vote. But in fact, as we see, most white people have voted Republican in the last several presidential elections, and most felons in Minnesota are white. So, and men also are more likely to vote Republican than women, and most felons are men. And so it shouldn't be a bipartisan issue. It should just be a justice issue. But in fact, because it's politicized so much, I think the Republicans might even realize that it really should be it's probably a neutral issue from a partisanship standpoint, but even if they understand that and believe that, I think they would get a lot of negative pushback from national party officials to say you shouldn't be doing that. And so I think it makes it really hard for people to do what the right thing in a justice.
Can I ask a question too, just about?
I'm sorry. This is Kathy. If I might add on that, I think the current leadership in the Republican Party in Minnesota have a couple of individuals who feel very strongly that felons should not get the right to vote once they're out of prison, and have kind of kept the lid on it, even when there is an increasing number of people in that caucus who are beginning to feel differently. And I think it will change with time, but right now we seem to be stuck.
That's great. Jack, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, based on Jeff's presentation too, I mean, Minnesota having the #1 turnout record and also having a very presidentially blue voter turnout, like the most of any state. Just I wonder how those are connected to and in the mindset of those party leaders you talked about, Jenny, and how, if that informs that kind of, look what happens with high voter turnout. Is that possibly part of it?
Point. Yeah, that I think that, I mean, I think that's one reason that really drives my participation is the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Our first principle is that I think elections and democracy work better when everyone participates, but obviously that's not widely held by all partisan groups. And so I think that issue, generally reducing the vote, I think is seen as for partisan advantage. And even if it's neutral, well, you know, it may not always be neutral, so it's not worth it, you know, the effort.
That's great.
I'm going to just want to say one other thing that we've been involved with, and that is we've done, most recently, Jeff Narabrook organized an event or a program called Adopt a School. And that was to encourage nonpartisan groups to go outreach to schools and do educational events with students, high school seniors, and register them to vote and do educational events with them. And so we had a big group, I think there were 8 of us that went to Southwest High School in Minneapolis, which is the closest school to my house, conveniently enough, and one of the big ones. And the teachers were very receptive. We taught classes all day long to seniors and registered them to vote. About half the classes of each class was eligible to vote and hadn't yet registered. And then we gave this great presentation that actually Jeff had prepared that showed some of those turnout figures. And we did this wonderful little exercise that showed, okay, you know, we had this mock issue that we were voting, I think more money for colleges, you know, and then more money for, you know, elderly care or something like that. And so we all voted and we said everyone, you know, some people were millennials and some were baby boomers, and we divide the class evenly. And so of course, well, actually the millennial issue won, more money for college. And then we said, no, you millennials didn't vote. Only 1 out of 5 of you voted. No election. So 4 of you sit down, your votes don't count. And the boomers, 80% of them had voted, so only 1 out of 5 would vote for them. And so, okay, guess what wins? Elderly care. So why do we fund Social Security but not college? It's pretty obvious when they're responding to who votes. And so it really made a big impression with the students, and it was a fun way to sort of show how, you know, voting matters. And if voting didn't matter so much, your one vote, there wouldn't be so much effort to suppress your vote. So we really tried to hit that home, and it was really a fun, inspiring day. And we came away really honoring and respecting teachers even more than usual, because it was really hard.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
But we hope to do some more of that. And I'll follow up with Jeff and see if they're doing anything this fall, before the election, but it's a great way and something that each church congregation around the state could adopt a school. And it's really a nice way to engage people, future voters. And once you get them voting once, then they're much more likely to vote. And they might take along their parents if their parents aren't voting.
Right? Yes.
It can
go
become
both ways. If your kids are voting, you're more likely to vote.
right.
Jenny and Kathy, I want to thank you so much, not just for your presentation tonight, but for the work that you have done in this area for years. And you are known around the state as the folks who do this and do it so well and with such passion. And we're just deeply grateful for that work and that living out of our principle about our belief in the democratic process and the right of conscience. So thank you for that. And that brings us to the end of our call tonight. I will link to all of the many wonderful resources and the video to this discussion on our website on the convening calls page, which you can find under programs and capacity building on our website. And we will likely publicize it too in our next newsletter. But I leave you with this thought from the revolutionary Emma Goldman, and it's edited to be more inclusive of people of all genders. Someday, people will rise. They will reach the mountain peak. They will meet big and strong and free, ready to receive, to partake, and to bask in the golden rays of love. What fancy, what imagination, what poetic genius can foresee the potentialities of such a force in the life of our kindred spirits. On that note, my friends, I will extinguish our chalice and say, carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again, and wish you all well. If you're not registered, I know everybody on this call is, but go get everybody else registered to vote and show up. Be well, everybody. Good night.